Hey you guys, this is Jess with Sourceful Journey, back with another video. So this next segment I want to focus on, again, is part of what we call things that make you say, I don't know, I just been on a bit of a tangent here as far as things I've kind of always been curious to know about. Just kind of sat back and analyzed a little bit and just have my own thoughts about it. I just wonder what others feel or what their thoughts are in terms of it as well. So this one in particular is going to be focused more so on what we all would deem to be leaders of God, you know, in various church settings. Just more so about their thoughts when it comes to various organizations. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into this chit chat. Okay, so leaders of God. When you think about leaders of God, you know, there's so many different titles, whether it's, you know, pastors or priests, you name it. So I've always been so curious to know when it comes to these people that hold such high titles within these establishments, if to join a fraternity or a sorority is viewed as something that is not of God, right? Why is it that a lot of these leaders tend to partake in something like that? Not only do they tend to join these sororities or fraternities prior to even being ordained for their current role within the church settings, but there's some that would actually, just got a notification, there's some that would join these organizations even well after they've gotten the title. So it's kind of like that notion of make it make sense, right? Why is it that these people in these roles tend to do that? But yet, when it comes to you being in the pulpit, you preach against it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Simply put, it doesn't make sense to half-ass the process. Plain and simple. Don't half-step it and tell others why they should not partake in those type of groups. I mean, if they are not of God, why continue to preach about it, but yet your actions are doing the complete opposite? It just does not make sense to me. I remember when I was coming up as a kid, I used to see it all the time. Like I know there were various people who did partake in those organizations, especially from the female side of the spectrum. Didn't think much of it. Again, as a kid, you just see it and you just say, oh, it's nothing. But as I got older, and I became curious. I know for me, I remember once I made it to high school, I think it was like my junior or senior year when I was in high school, I noticed a lot of the people that were in the main office of the school, whether it was like the principal or assistant principal, whatever title it may be, but they were in that main vicinity. A lot of them were a part of sororities. And what was interesting is that these very individuals did actually, in fact, attend the church that I attended when I was younger. I just got another notification there. And I remember right when I made it to my senior year, they were pushing very heavily for me to join one of these sororities. And I thought that was very interesting because I didn't understand why such a heavy push for me to join this particular sorority. What was the real underlying reason for that? At that stage of my life, I remember everything that I was considering doing, my mother pretty much shot it down. So, for instance, I remember when it came to going into the service, because we actually had people who came up to my high school to, you know, start recruiting for those who were considering going into like the army, the military. One of my good friends, her sister was stationed in Texas and she was already in the service. And of course, by default, she felt she wanted to go too. And I think she probably did. So we both went and signed up for it. I signed up without my mother's consent. I remember that evening, I was so excited about it, like, yeah, I'm gonna go into the service. And I thought I had it figured out to handle that first. And my mother, when I told her, she shot that idea down. She's like, no child of mine is going into the service, and definitely not my daughter. So of course I never got a chance to pursue it. But looking back at it, I'm kind of glad she did stop me. I'm glad she did. Now, to go into focusing on the whole thing with the sorority side of things, I noticed it was a huge uptick in terms of several people that were in that office that was pushing me to join this particular sorority. Excuse me. I was going to say fraternity, but I meant sorority in this case. And I remember bringing this to my mother's attention. She was seething. And when she found out who the individuals were, because again, we all went to the same church within a community, she was furious. And she said, no child of mine is going to join any type of fraternity or sorority. Now, my mother, she was a true old school believer in Christ. Like she loved the word. Like she kept the word close to her. She was that lady, that woman. And she felt that they were like not of God. She felt like if you partake in anything like that, that is something that is completely against what God has in place for us as his people, to put it plainly. And so I never got a chance to pursue it. Now, years later, I come across more people who have already partaken in that experience. And again, these are people who are actually going to the church. They are a part of a church organization. So I say all that to say, I just think it's very telling when, you have individuals who are in these roles, who preach against it, but yet they've partaken in it, or whether it was like prior to them getting the title, or even after they've gained the title. So this is where one has to really sit back and reflect. Is it truly, or should it truly be viewed as not being of God or following God if one chooses to join an organization such as like a fraternity or sorority? Is there truly, or should there truly be a dividing line when it comes to that? I mean, if we're gonna get this thing called life and actually try to walk the straight and narrow as much as we can, the reality is no one is perfect, very true. But when it comes to something that we can avoid, and to make sure we're truly, with all of our heart, trying to walk that narrow path, should we partake in those organizations, or should we avoid them? I would be lying to you if I would say, if I ever told you, let me just word it that way. If I ever told you that I haven't considered it, even being that I'm much older now, it'd be a complete lie. Because the more I did my research on these various organizations, both fraternities and sororities, even some of those that are not falling within that plane, but that is still an organization, some of the details behind them are truly not that bad. Again, it's all about environmental conditioning. In some cases, some of us are conditioned to believe that this is not of God, this is sinful to partake in these type of groups. But if you truly did your research, and again, do a comparative analysis, you'll see that these groups are really not that conspicuous They're not that different from one another. Even down to the religious institutions as well. My thoughts about it, I say this a lot in a lot of my videos, go with your gut. And do your research, just do your research. It doesn't take much time to do so. And there's some that are like me, I tend to like to really get to the nitty gritty, if you will, when it comes to dissecting the details with whatever I'm looking at that present time. So just based on my own analysis, I see a lot of similarities. I see very few differences when it comes to these different groups. I just would hope that when it comes to these leaders of God, right? And this is for any religious organization, not just Christians. This is for any. We're talking about leaders of God with the various different titles. I would just hope that they would be more realistic with their congregation. Excuse me, that was a tongue twister. Be more realistic with your congregation about why one should kind of like maybe take into consideration that these organizations are really not that bad after all. What are you guys' thoughts about that? I'm sure I'm not the only one that's taking time out to kind of do a comparative analysis of these different groups and to really see if there's truly anything bad about them or not. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts. Definitely feel free to either message me in the comment section below. You can also message me on the other platforms as you guys have been. Keep that up. I love it, love it, love it. Emails are just as welcome, so keep that going too. But I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts about that. I know earlier on, and not to continue to, be redundant with my statement here, I know for a fact that these groups are not that different from one another. When you look at the basis of why they were created and by whom and what their mission is or mission statement, they're not that different from one another. And I think that's very telling within itself. So if I had to pass on any food for thought, if you will, just do your research and you'll see it for yourself as well. As always, I am definitely seeing you guys with love and light, and I will see you in the next video. Be blessed.